Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and today we're going to be talking about the Lightning Sorceress for leveling in Diablo 4. In this video, we're going to go through all of the aspects that we're going to be using. These are all off of the codex, so there's no RNG at all. You can just get them pretty easily. We're also going to talk about the skill tree, what the order of the points that I took, the Paragon board, and all that good stuff. Now, if you are looking for a cheat sheet to kind of follow along with in the video, all you have to do is click the link in the description below. It'll take you to the Mobalytics site. There'll be a guide just like this one for my Bone Spear build, except for it'll be for this particular build. And if you have the Mobalytics app, you can actually just open this up and have an overlay in the game so that you can follow along with the build. So starting off right away with the aspects, like I said before, we're only using aspects that you can get out of the Codex of Power. And this is really just so that you don't have to worry about gambling or finding a particular legendary power to feel strong with the build. You may notice that I don't have any aspects at all on my weapon or my offhand. And the reason for this is because as you're leveling, you're going to make sure that you can easily replace your weapons as you're leveling. Because if you put a legendary power on your weapon, now that's kind of like messing with the formula of, this new weapon has a higher item level, but is it better to replace it or to hold on to it? That's kind of hard to tell. So what I recommend doing is not putting any legendary powers intentionally on your weapons. Instead, put them on your rings or amulet or gloves, and then you can just keep upgrading your weapons whenever you get a new drop. So if you get a new one-handed sword that's better than the weapon you were using before, you just use that new weapon and you just upgrade it at the blacksmith as well. Because upgrading your item power of your items is a big deal in this game, especially for weapons. And so highly recommend just doing that. Now talking about aspects, the aspects that I do kind of recommend that you kind of look at are like Edge Master's aspect. This makes it so that you're going to get some basically free damage just for having more resources. Sorc kind of gets a lot of free resource regeneration. You generate a whole bunch of mana as you're moving around, and that will just help you out. We're also going to get Prodigy's aspect. This gives you 15 mana every time you use a cooldown. And we have several cooldowns in the build, and so this can just let you pump out some more damage or recover your mana as you're moving with teleport. Elementalist aspect is actually pretty ridiculous as well. This makes it so your core or mastery skills, we're using core skill in this build, are when they're cast above 100 mana, they gain 20% increased critical strike chance, and that is just a lot of crit. Now, you do start off with 100 mana, so you're going to want to find more flat mana on your gear, because keeping that up is going to be very helpful for you. But this is something that by the time you make it to Act 3, which is where Dry Steps is, you should not really have any problems getting a little bit of mana on your gear. The other damage one here is Aspect of the Expectant. This makes it so that attacking enemies with basic skills increases the damage of your next core skill. This will take you total of 6 attacks to max out, so I really wouldn't worry about it too much. However, we will be using Arc Lash a lot because it is an absolutely bonkers basic skill that the Sorc gets access to. For the boots, Ghostwalker aspect is just ludicrous. Anytime you get Unstoppable, which is both with your Flame Shield and your teleport, you're going to get increased attack speed for 4 seconds afterwards, which is not attack speed, movement speed. You're going to increase the movement speed, and that's really, really great. For defenses, we have Aspect of the Protector, which gives you a little shield when you hit an elite, which is pretty noticeable when you're leveling. Aspect of Might gives you basic skill damage reduction, and then Aspect of Disobedience increases our armor as we go. Now for gems, as we're leveling, we don't really necessarily have a super great way of applying Vulnerable, and so I'm just going to recommend using a Topaz. These increase your basic skill damage. You will end up casting Arc Lash a whole bunch, and Arc Lash does a lot of damage, and so Topaz gems aren't really wasted here. For the body armor, you can definitely go Ruby, or you could instead go Diamond if you really want to increase your barrier generation. Either one of these is fine, and I recommend Skulls for your jewelry. Skulls just give you quite a bit of armor, and we're going to be probably stacking Intellect as we go, which will give us a lot of all resistance, so Skulls kind of help out in general. We've kind of already gone over most of the skills here that we're using, but for enchantments, we're going to be using Fireball, which is a kind of ridiculous enchantment. You'll really notice as soon as this pops off when you hit level 15, you activate this for the first time. Anytime you kill an enemy, they just explode with a fireball for 50% of its damage, which is noticeable for sure. I remember the first time I turned this on and I'd arc lashed And then I hit in with my charge bolt and everything just exploded. It's really, really quite goofy. And so highly recommend having this as a leveling enchant. And then eventually we're going to take Firebolt because it's going to allow us to take advantage of a lot of burning damage multipliers that are in the game for the Sorc. Let's just hop right into the build planner here. And we're going to start off with going and getting Arc Lash and Enhanced Arc Lash. This is just a absolutely incredible basic skill. It's very fast. It has a decent range for a melee skill. It does 42% base damage, which is comparable to some classes like Core Skill, just as a basic skill. And then every 10 times it swipes, it'll stun all enemies it hits for 2 seconds, which is pretty noticeable when you're like actually spamming this. Going getting Enhanced Arc Lash, it makes it so that if your initial swipe critically strikes, it swipes a second time. So this is very nice as well. After that, we're going to go and get Charged Bolt. Charged Bolt basically is similar to like a Path of Exile Spark, where you're going to shoot out 5 bolts of lightning and they kind of spread out and kind of go do their own thing. And each of them just does 28% damage. Now this might not seem like a lot, but if you shoot this at point blank at an elite, you're going to hit with all 5 of those sparks, and that's 5 times 28, so like 140% damage, which is pretty nice. The next thing we're going to recommend taking is Enhanced Charge Bolts. This thing is kind of like the moneymaker of the build, if you would, because hitting an enemy with at least 3 times with the same cast of Charge Bolts releases a Nova, and that deals 24% damage to enemies around them. This doesn't sound like it's all that big of a deal, but this allows you to basically walk right up to elite, cast 2 charge bolts, and everything around them dies. And then once you have the Fireball enchantment where they're exploding as well, it just everything explodes in lightning and fire, and it is pretty cool. After that, we are going to go and take Flickering Arc Lash. This might seem like a little bit weird to kind of go back as opposed to continuing on in here. However, Flickering Arc Lash is ludicrous for leveling. Absolutely so nice. It gives you 18% movement speed, and you should try to keep this buff up as much as you can without slowing yourself down, of course, because 18% movement speed, especially at like early game where you have no movement speed and no mount, is very noticeable. Highly recommend this. And then after that, we're just going to go back and we're going to take another point and charge bolts. This unlocks the defensive part of our tree, and so we're going to go and take Teleport and Ice Armor, and these 2 cooldown skills are really great. Teleport is kind of an insane movement skill. It'll just makes you unstoppable, which removes all crowd control, allows you to basically teleport from one spot to another. You can like ignore cliffs and stuff. You can move to spots that like might seem like you wouldn't be able to walk there type of thing, at least not directly, and it's very strong. Ice Armor also gives us a lot of survivability here because it gives us basically a instantaneous barrier for 6 seconds, and 5% of your damage that is dealt is added to that barrier, so you can kind of like charge it up as well, especially if you're doing a lot of damage to a lot of enemies. After that, we're going to go and take Glass Cannon. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like Glass Cannon, but this, or at least kind of shy away from it at first because it seems like, oh, I'm getting a little bit more damage, but I'm taking more damage. That's kind of scary. Well, for leveling, this is just going to help you continue to one-shot enemies even more. And this is like a multiplicative damage source, so it is pretty big for us. We're going to go and put the next 3 points up in here into Charge Bolt, though, just to finish up basically what we're doing. And this is just going to give us quite a bit of damage. And then we're going to go take Flame Shield. This should put you around like level 15, level 16, depending on what your renowned situation is like. And at that point, you're going to get your class quest, which you can just basically go do real quick. You have to like run into a dungeon that actually gives you one of the aspects that we want to get, Aspect of the Protector. And so you go and do that. And we're going to go take a point in Fireball. And now every time you kill an enemy, they explode for a fireball, doing a whole bunch of damage, which is just very nice for clear speed. I think it's maybe a little bit imbalanced at low level, but it's not that big of a deal. Next, we're going to have enhanced teleport, which makes it so that when you teleport into enemies, the cooldown of teleport can be reduced by up to 3 seconds. So it's already an 11-second cooldown. So if you're using this aggressively to move into enemy packs, it will come back even faster. And then we're going to take enhanced flame shield for a little bit more movement speed. And about this time, you should probably be like already in Skazglen. And these two skills here are going to provide you with unstoppable, which is going to trigger the Ghost Walker aspect. So you're probably going to be zooming pretty quickly between the move speed of these and the move speed from Arc Lash. And it's going to feel really nice for leveling, especially until you get your mount. Next, I'm going to recommend taking Destructive Charged Bolts. We're around level 20 right now, and this is going to make it so that we're getting just 20% damage reduction from things that we're hitting with our main skill for 3 seconds. And this will give us just another little layer of survivability. Next up, we are going to go and take Align the Elements and then Protection. Align the Elements kind of got a massive nerf going into the server slam, where it used to give you quite a bit of damage reduction against elites for each second you haven't taken damage from one, but they kind of reduced how much it was ticking up for. And now if you take damage when it hits your barrier, it still removes the buff supposedly. So this is just not as good as it once was. It's kind of good for like the first hit maybe in a fight, but overall it's not something that's going to impact you too much. Whereas Protection is really great. You're going to get, anytime you use a cooldown, you get a 30% maximum life barrier for 2 seconds. And so this allows you to really just time your teleport, flame shield, and ice armor here. Just give yourself more health. And so if you see a big enemy attack coming, you can just use any of these skills and you're going to survive even more. Now, of course, with flame shield, you're not going to take any damage anyways, so it doesn't really matter. And ice armor is going to give you a shield on top of that, but this is going to help you be extremely tanky feeling with all of these combinations. Next up from that, we are actually going to be able to unlock our ultimate. So we unlock Unstable Currents and Prime Unstable Currents. Now, Unstable Currents is a 70-second cooldown, which is quite long. But what this does is makes it so that lightning surges around you for 10 seconds. And whenever you cast a shock skill, which is like any lightning skill basically, a random core, conjuration, or mastery skill, shock skill, will also be cast. And so the shock skills that you can get are Ball Lightning, you can get Lightning Spear, and you can get either Chain Lightning or Charge Bolts. And so ideally, when you have this up, and since it's such a long cooldown, you're only really going to pop it on bosses or very difficult elite packs. You basically can spam either of your two big skills, Charge Bolt or Arc Lash. These are both shock skills. And so you should just be every moment using one of these skills, or teleport, I guess, is also workable, so that you just maximize your damage out. And you're just going to absolutely annihilate enemies with this. This increases your attack speed, which I think is good for the I want to spam as many spells as possible type of playstyle. However, the Supreme Unstable Currents is not that good. Shock skills have this thing called Crackling Energy, where you basically drop this little like ball on the ground. You can pick it up and it shocks enemies. But for leveling, it doesn't really seem all that great. It seems like something that's probably more of a late game, have to set up all the synergies type of thing, because you basically, if you pick up the little Crackling Energy, it like will shock pots and breakables and other stuff. And it just doesn't seem all that great for leveling to mess around with. So I really wouldn't bother with this. Next, we're going to go all the way back up to the top, level up Arc Lash to max. The reason for this is it's something you're still going to be using all of the time. You're going to be using it for flickering Arc Lash to give yourself more movement speed, and it just does quite a bit of damage. Still, 59% damage per little swipe is still pretty noticeable. And yeah, it's just giving you more damage overall, which is not a bad thing. Now, we're about level probably 30, maybe like 28 or so, depending on your renown. And so the next thing we're going to be taking is Firebolt enchant. And so we're going to start preparing for that. And so the very first, don't mean to click that. The very first thing we're going to take here is Fiery Surge. And we're eventually going to go all the way over to Warmth. And this is kind of one of the big reasons why we are going to be taking that bolt, is because we want to heal for every nearby enemy that is burning. And this is just big survivability, especially because we're going to be in melee. And kind of like as soon as you unlock that enchantment, you can go and take Firebolt here. It might be like right now, might be after a couple more points, depending on how you've been leveling. I believe it's at level 30. And so you're going to go Endless Fire and Warmth. And this should bring you to level 34, which unlocks our key passive. Now there's 2 cold, 2 fire, and 2 lightning ones here. Overflowing energy is all about crackling energy, so it's not really good for us. But Veer's Mastery makes it so that close enemies, which are enemies that are in melee range, take more damage from our shock skills, and they do less damage to us. And critical strikes increase these bonuses by 25% for 3 seconds. So this is just pretty nice. This synergizes well with what we're doing with this up close and personal lightning playstyle. So go ahead and take that. And then we are going to go and finish off Warmth. Warmth is just absolutely bonkers. Now you're only almost getting 1% of a heal every time you are near a burning enemy, and enemies will become burning basically from all of your direct damage now, thanks to the Firebolt enchant. Makes it so that direct damage from skills applies an additional burning damage. So if they're hit by, the explosion of your bolts going out, if they're hit by one of the spells that are coming out of unstable currents, if they're hit by your arc lash, they're now burning and just feeding you life back, which just feels really good. It's pretty hard to get heals on Sorc, and so this is just some technology that I think a lot of sorceresses are going to be taking advantage of. Next up, we're going to go take Coursing Currents. This makes it so that hitting enemies with shock skills increases your critical chance by 1%, and this just resets after you get a crit, which I honestly don't think that this is all that strong. So we're only going to put 1 point in here, and then we're going to go and put 3 points in Electrocution. This makes it so that enemies deal 15% less damage for 5 seconds after being critically struck by your shock skills. So this should potentially give us a little bit of a lucky crit occasionally, which will trigger this off. Also, anytime we're popping unstable currents, that's a lot of shock spells that are going out and just zapping. And so you should be able to get some electrocution going here. Next up, I'm going to recommend taking Convulsions. This makes it so your shock skills have a small chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds, which when it procs is going to be pretty big and pretty nice. And it's just more survivability for us. Speaking of more survivability, if we go all the way up here, we're going to get Enhanced Ice Armor. This is going to give us increased mana regeneration while Ice Armor is active, so we can shoot out more stuff. And then we're going to go take Mystical Flame Shield, which makes it so that we gain mana cost reduction while Flame Shield is active, so we can shoot out more stuff during that short period of time. You can also take Shimmering Flame Shield if you want. This kind of gives you a heal for 50% of your missing life. So if you activate this at half health, it'll heal you for a quarter, but I'm just going to recommend Mystical Flame Shield for now. Next up, we're going to go and take Mana Shield. Every time we spend 100 mana, we're going to gain 15% damage reduction for 5 seconds. We're going to end up spamming a lot of spells, and so when you are like actively like, I need to spam a lot of spells, you're going to get more damage reduction, which is probably when you want this the most. Next, we're going to go take Devastation. It's going to increase our maximum mana by 3, and then take Elemental Dominance. This gives our core skills increased damage when they're cast above 50 mana, and so it's just more damage here for Charged Bolt. I'm not sure if this counts for the Chain Lightnings and Charge Bolts that come from our ultimate, but we'll have to test that for sure. Next up, I recommend taking Shimmering Teleport. This gives you increased damage reduction for 5 seconds. If you feel like you're kind of like scared of teleporting into enemies or having a hard time, you could potentially take this earlier in the build and it would be totally fine. Next, I'm going to recommend taking 3 points in Precision Magic. This increases your lucky hit chance, which we do have a couple lucky hit effects, and we're kind of like wrapping up the last points here. Anyways, this is not a bad thing to pick up. And then we're going to put the last 2 points in Teleport, just for some more survivability. If you want to go and take these points and put them into Ice Armor or put them into Flame Shield, you could potentially do that as well. But I'm just going to put them in the Teleport for more movement, basically. Now, when we're looking at Paragon boards for this particular build, it's kind of a little strange because Lightning Paragon boards are kind of bad. It's a very weird situation right now, and hopefully something that they resolve in the future, because you basically have Paragon boards that either boost your crackling energy or boost your damage against stunned enemies. And stunned is a very conditional multiplier. Enemies can become immune to stun, bosses are immune to stun, unless you stagger them. And so it's not really all that good. So we're going to do something a little bit sneaky. First, we're going to start off with the cool S here. And this is like definitely like probably the standard way to go through. We're not going to pick up any glyphs unless you get like a really great glyph that can like go in the slot, like any of the intelligence ones could probably be fine. And you could fill it out. Early on, I don't really expect to get the glyphs that I want right away, and so I didn't plan around that. The next board that we're going to take is surprisingly Burning Instinct. Burning Instinct is actually kind of ridiculous because it has a lot of against enemies that are burning multipliers. So we have damage reduction from enemies that are burning and damage to burning enemies, which pretty much, since we're using our firebolt here to make all direct damage burn enemies, this counts. And so even though we're basically a lightning Sorc, we're going to go take advantage of the fire boards and pick up all of this stuff here. So we're going to go over and take these two nodes. This is a lot of damage over here and damage reduction. Go through the center here. This is more damage reduction and damage to elites, which is really nice. When it says elites, that means elites, champions, hostile PvP players, and bosses. And then we're going to go all the way up here to go get this last node for more damage reduction, which is just, I think, nice. It's going to help you feel a lot more comfortable going into World Tier 4 and just having more survivability. Now, some things that we could change moving forward past this point is I think that there's an opportunity to eventually drop Fireball, potentially, maybe even take Frostbolt and add in a little tri-elemental stuff here. But we're going to have to try it out and see what works well in World Tier 4. Hopefully this build serves you well. I'm going to be pushing to 100 as fast as I possibly can. I'll be playing it along with Gazzy TV and Paul's, and we're going to be, I'm a Barbarian, Gazzy's a Necromancer, Paul's is going to be playing Druid, and we have a Sorc who's probably going to be playing something similar to this, and you come hang out with us on stream. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.